Hungary has always had a policy of assimilation. And World War II, the Holocaust era, was exceptional in this way. What they say is, yes, you'll speak to Jews, and they say there's a lot of anti-Semitism. And online there is, because it's international. There is some from Hungary, but there's some from everywhere. But he says, look, I walk down the street looking like this. I have never been bothered. I've never been attacked, and I feel completely safe.
Ezra Levant here for Rebel News. I am on a mission to tell the truth about Hungary, but first I have to find out the truth. We're doing a whole video series. You can see all of it at thetruthabouthungary.com. And actually, that journey has taken us to Romania, where we are today, but I'm glad it has, because we bumped into an expert on one of the questions that I've been asking, because a lot of hostility towards Hungary implies that Hungary is somehow intolerant or bigoted of minorities, of migrants, of gay people. And one of the calumnies I've heard is that it is anti-Semitic, and that sets my alarms off because, first of all, I'm concerned about genuine anti-Semitism. I'm Jewish myself, and even if I weren't, I would like to think I'm against anti-Semitism. But second of all, I know that playing that card, calling someone anti-Semitic, is a too easy go-to trick by people these days to smear a critic who may simply be conservative. And so when we were in Budapest, Hungary, we went into the Jewish quarter and we saw magnificent synagogues and a surprising number of kosher restaurants. But most of the Jews we saw were either tourists from Israel, such as those we encountered when we were at a Holocaust memorial on the banks of the Danube, or just other Jews who were going to synagogue while they happened to be in town. I found it somewhat difficult to find actual indigenous Hungarian Jews to go on camera. I asked several, but they were too shy. Which brings me to our very special guest today, who in fact is a distinguished scholar at the Danube Institute. And I was delighted to learn that the question I was seeking to answer in the streets of Budapest, how is it to be a Jew in Hungary these days, is in fact the study of a 2-year work of scholarship by Dr. Jeffrey Kaplan. I'm delighted to speak with him now. Thanks very much for taking the time. I'm really glad to meet you.
I'm glad to meet you. Thank you very much for inquiring.
Well, it's something I want to get right, because there's obviously political aims behind it. When people say you're anti-Semitic, that could be an observation or it could be an attack. And likewise, when my hackles get up and I think, well, if you're calling Orban anti-Jewish, if it were true, I would hate him, but I think it's false, so I'm doubly supportive of him. I want to just get the facts. You have studied this question scientifically. You've done research into it for years. Tell me, first of all, your process of finding out what's the Jewish community like in Hungary, and then tell me the results.
Okay, let me begin at the beginning. When I came to Hungary in 2019, I was absolutely convinced by my reading of the Western press that there was a great deal of anti-Semitism in Hungary, that Prime Minister Orban and Fidesz used this as a means to get power. And so when I got to the Danube Institute, I thought, this would be a good research topic. And it's, as you know, the Danube is very conservative, but they said, fine, go for it. I gathered a group of junior researchers who were really very good, Hungarian, and they said, it's not really true. And so I said, okay, let's find out. And so this was the beginning of a 2-year process. We interviewed the leaders of the Jewish community. We went to the synagogues. We held an international conference which brought together the leaders of the Jewish community, scholars and NGOs from Israel, from the United States, and from the EU. And what we found in the end was virtually the opposite of what I had felt. There was a terrible problem of anti-Semitism back around 2010, 2011. It goes into the political parties there. There was a group who called themselves the Hungarian Guard. And they were very much modeled on the Arrow Cross in World War II. They were part of a political party called Jobbik, yes. which still exists, and there's another story there. But
Well, tell me, I mean, I didn't mean to interrupt you, but when you said that they were like an echo of the Arrow Cross, and I had just visited that House of Terror museum, so I am burning with a hatred for the Arrow Cross as well as the communists. Tell me the sneak preview of the ending. How did they do in that election?
the sneak preview of the ending is that Jobbik went a step too far. They kept a separation from the Hungarian Guard, but not a big separation. It was pretty obvious. They floated an idea in Parliament called the Jewish List.
Oh my God.
Which was it was the ancient calumny of dual loyalty. So they tried to create a list of Jews in government who were dangerous. The reaction was great. To make a very long story short, Fidesz was elected. Fidesz was not part of this. And Orban, to the amazement of the outside world, first thing he did in terms of the Jewish community was outlaw the Hungarian Guard.
Wow. I did not know that.
Yeah.
And I think there's a reason I didn't know that. Not that I lack curiosity, but that story was not told, because that story redounds to Viktor Orban's credit and to Hungary's credit.
Well, they went farther. The stories inside Hungary are not very well known to the outside world. But it was one thing to ban this small group of radicals. That's nothing. They also created a law that made public expressions of anti-Semitism illegal. They share considerable resources with the Jewish community. And the Jews...
I hear the schools are funded, for example, which is not the case in many, back home in my country. I can tell you that's certainly not the case in most jurisdictions.
To make a very long story short, last summer there was a meeting of the European Jewish Congress. They met in Budapest. And the report they issued was that the two safest places for Jews in Europe, where they are most safe, most prosperous, and most accepted, is Hungary and Italy. We published a 2-volume study called Antisemitism in Hungary, Appearance and Reality. There is the appearance on the outside world that I came to Hungary absolutely believing, and then there's the reality that was research-driven.
I'm not deeply familiar with Europe. I live in North America, and that's my focus. But I have been to Paris, and I've been to some of the Jewish institutions, or even a Jewish delicatessen or supermarket. There are armed French police with semi-automatic weapons. I walked through the Jewish streets of Budapest with the most major synagogues, so many kosher restaurants. I neither saw police, nor did I see anti-Semitic graffiti. There's a lot of graffiti in Hungary. I haven't seen any anti-Semitic graffiti. And I thought, this feels safe. This feels safer than Paris, for sure.
Well, we were talking to one of the leaders of Chabad, which is the Lubavitcher movement, and they really look Jewish.
Yeah. Oh, they're not hiding. They've got not just a little yarmulke. They got big black hats, black coats, the white tassels. You can spot them at 100 meters.
Absolutely. And what they say is, yes, you'll speak to Jews, and they say there's a lot of anti-Semitism. And online there is, because it's international. There is some from Hungary, but there's some from everywhere. But he says, look, I walk down the street looking like this. I have never been bothered. I've never been attacked, and I feel completely safe.
You can't say that in New York City, by the way.
No, you can't. You can't say it in Paris. You can't say it in Stockholm. But you can say it in Budapest.
You know, we interviewed one young man, but he was a minor, so I didn't want to put him on TV. And he said something very similar. He said it's very safe, no problem. He said life is easy as a Jew in Budapest. But when I asked him generically, he said, oh, there's anti-Semitism, but he had never seen it. But in his mind, he was worried about it. Maybe it's online, or maybe he was given a certain talking point. I don't want to put him on because I think he was a young kid, and he wasn't a scholar. It was more an anecdote than a study. But I felt safe in the Jewish community, and I felt like it was seamless. The Jewish community, non-Jews in the Jewish neighborhoods, and vice versa. It felt like it wasn't a thing.
It's not. Somebody that young, if he's that young, he really won't remember the Jobbik period. The Jobbik story is fascinating because they lost at the polls. but they were still one of the largest parties in Hungary. In the last election, they ran with the left. They were completely soundly defeated, and now there's a party called Mihazonk, which is very careful about what they say in terms of anti-Semitism, anti-Roma sentiment. It's there. But Mihazonk has really taken over that niche that Jobbik had. Jobbik is pointless now.
How has your research been received by the larger academic community? Because if you yourself went in, perhaps as most of them have, but then you did the work, 2 volumes, 6 staff, countless interviews, what do your fellow scholars say?
Scholars themselves and the scholarly community, it's been well received. It is, to be honest, a little bit difficult to publish a lot about Hungary in Western journals. Simply won't read it. If Orban's name is there, it's like mentioning the devil in the Middle Ages. But it's, again, and I say this from a very apolitical kind of standpoint, the scholarly community itself has really very well received these books, and in fact our publisher is American. We did not publish it with a Hungarian publisher because I knew it wouldn't be taken seriously.
When I was at the Budapest airport, 4 flights in one day to Tel Aviv, which was on par with other major cities like London. And I thought, that is a lot of traffic between the two countries. So obviously, if there's that much travel from Israel, obviously Israelis aren't scared. Israelis are sort of tough anyways, but maybe it was the neighborhoods I was in Budapest, but other than English, the most common language I heard was Hebrew. What are Hungary-Israel ties like? Do you know about that?
It's complex. Underlying it all is the fact that many Israelis are of Hungarian descent. And so the family ties remain strong. In the older generation in Hungary, there are memories of the Holocaust, and so the memories of Hungary are very black. It's much more nuanced in the modern times, but the close personal relationship between Netanyahu and Orban plays well in Likud, but it doesn't necessarily play well in the other half of Israel.
It would be like if Trump said something, his supporters would like it, but his opponents would do the opposite just to spite him. Is that what having Netanyahu like Orban does? It sort of forces a partisan divide on the same issue?
It really does, because Israel is much more deeply divided, as you know, than even America at this point.
I was surprised to see so many Jewish restaurants and synagogues, because I had believed that the Hungarian Jewish community was practically annihilated. The Holocaust came late to Hungary.
It did.
But it came with a brutality and a violence that was perhaps unparalleled. How many Jews remain in Hungary? How many are in Budapest? How many in the rest of the country? Is it a tourist's curiosity? Like perhaps Morocco. I know many Jews go to Morocco because they're of Sephardic descent and they just want to see the old country, but there's not a very large community there. It's more a curiosity. What's it like in Budapest and Hungary numerically?
Well, this is a very interesting and in some ways a very political question. There are Jewish organizations there that claim 100,000. There are others that are more realistic, and it's around 40. But who is Jewish? And that becomes the question. Hungary has always had a policy of assimilation. And World War II, the Holocaust era, was exceptional in this way. But Hungarian Jews have tended to assimilate. The communist period sped this up quite a bit. And so the question of who is Jewish, who are you counting? If you go to the synagogues for Shabbat, it's very difficult for them to find a minyan. 10 people, there are 40,000 Jews, largely in Budapest, but they don't practice. And so they are very much secular. They're very much secularized. They intermarry quite a lot. And so those, for example, Chabad counts the number of Jews as much smaller simply because of Jewish law. You are a Jew if you have a Jewish mother. If not, not.
Very interesting. As I was walking the streets, I would try and talk to people. almost all of them were tourists. I mean, there are some obviously in the community. Very interesting. Well, I have to say, I mean, the name of our project here is The Truth About Hungary. And I feel like I've learned more facts, researched facts from you in the last 20 minutes than I have in my entire life heretofore. And I mean, maybe that just means I didn't know a lot before, but I think what you've said would surprise a lot of people. If it surprised the you of 4 years ago, then surely it would surprise lay people too. I wonder if this information is getting out as broadly as it should, and if not, I wonder why.
That's out of my area. Yeah. That I have not researched, so I have very little comment on it. But no, it's not well known.
Well, we'll do our best. We're going to put this video out, and we'll send it to people who are interested in Hungary, and we'll send it to people who are interested in the state of the Jews, which is not just Jewish people. I mean, anti-Semitism is often a precursor of terrible things to come. And the fact that Hungary has been especially this government has been so supportive of Jews in the ways that you've mentioned and the other ways that I had learned supporting the schools, it is a happy story that I take with me out of here. Thank you so much for talking with me, and I will look more into the publications you've done, and I'm just very grateful for you opening my eyes. Thank you for this.
Thank you for the opportunity.
All right, well, there you have it. Dr. Kaplan, what a pleasure, distinguished fellow of the Danube Institute, and telling me something I did not expect when I arrived in Budapest some days ago. To see all of our reports, go to thetruthabouthungary.com. And if you think this information is something you value, and you know you wouldn't get it from anyone else, please feel free to chip in a few dollars to help crowdfund our trip. I'm in Eastern Europe asking the question, what's the truth about Hungary? What is that country like? And why do leftists in the West hate it so much? To see all of my reports and to chip into our crowd-funded citizen journalism, go to thetruthabouthungary.com.